How do rural voters feel about the president?
Yeah, you know, Iowa has been traditionally a field of dreams for the president of the United States, but it's quickly turning into potentially a field of nightmares. There seems to be a rural revolt going on in this country against Donald Trump. Take a look here. Rural voters on Trump. Look, according to Fox News, he was easily winning them back in October of 2024 versus Kamala Harris. 18 points ahead. The exit poll even had it a bigger margin. But look at where he is now. Woo! Down there, underwater, underneath the cornfields, he's now 14 points underwater. That's an over 30-point switcheroo against the President of the United States. As I said, there appears to be a rural vote going against Donald Trump.
What could one of those reasons be?
You know, one of the big reasons that there seems to be a rural vote against Donald Trump, simply put, it's the economy, it's inflation. Take a look at this. You thought that switcheroo was big. How about this one? Rural voters on Trump and inflation. Versus Kamala Harris, he was more trusted by 37 points. Now he is 19 points underwater with rural voters on inflation. That is an over 50-point switcheroo against the President of the United States. Rural voters, like the rest of the country, turning against Trump on the key issue that got him elected to a second term back in 2024.
That is a big, big shift.
That is a huge shift.
Okay, as you noted, the president's sort of endorsement primary magic wore off in Iowa, and you saw this happening kind of in real time on election night.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, Donald Trump went and he has won all of these primaries. The candidates he's endorsed have won all of these primaries. Did not happen in Iowa. We'll just talk about Iowa Republicans here. The gubernatorial primary, he endorsed Randy Feenstra, a congressman from Iowa, and Feenstra actually won the absentee vote in that state by 15 points. Trump endorsed late. But the other candidate, Zach Lane, look at this. He actually won those who voted on Election Day, who knew about Trump's endorsement. In fact, they were considered more favorable to Lane than they were to Feenstra, even after knowing that Trump had, in fact, backed Feenstra. It seemed to me that Iowa Republicans said, you know what? We hear you, Donald Trump, but you know what? We're dismissing that message. Again, part of a larger picture, in my mind, of rural voters not tuning in to what Donald Trump is selling them at this point.
So if something different is happening with rural voters, maybe in Iowa, what might that mean for Democratic chances in November? What do the prediction markets say?
Yeah, okay, the last Democrat to win a Senate race in Iowa was all the way back in 2008. It was Tom Harkin. But what do we see here in terms of the Democrats' chances in Iowa, in the governor's race and the Senate race? They have gone up like a rocket. We're now talking about Rob Sands running for governor with a greater than 50% chance. And it turns out that Josh Turek, who the Democratic establishment wanted, his chances have also been considerably rising at this point. If all of a sudden you're able to put Iowa on the board, if you're a Democrat hoping to win back control of the United States Senate, hey, that would be a massive piece of the puzzle. And the last time Iowa elected a Democratic governor was all the way back in 2006. And that looks like a more likely possibility than not, according to the Kalshi prediction markets, at least at this point.
All right, Iowa, stay tuned.
They're very nice. The most unpopular war at the start of a war that I could ever find, has become even more unpopular. That's what those Republicans in the House are seeing. Just take a look here. Net approval rating of the Iran war. At the start, it was underwater, -9 points. Now it's down there with the Strait of Hormuz. Look at this, -23 points. This is a war that has become more unpopular, even as President Trump and his administration has tried to sell it. And among independents, it's gone from 23 points underwater to, get this, 40 points underwater with independents. So those Republicans who, in fact, did not vote with the renegade Republicans, they are helping to put that Republican majority, which was already at great risk in the House, in even more risk.
It's on the wrong trajectory right now.
No, this is the wrong place. You want to be going up, not down.
How do people feel about the congressional approval?
Yeah, okay. How do people feel about the idea that military force needs congressional approval? Okay, this is pretty simple. Against presidents using military force without Congress's approval. Look at this. 63% overall are against the idea that, in fact, the president could just go willy-nilly without congressional approval. How about independents? 72%. 72%, more than 2 in 3 independents are against the idea that the president can, in fact, use military force without congressional approval. So the American people, independents, very much with that House vote yesterday with the idea is, hey, the president actually has to come to Congress to use military force, and independents especially so, Johnny B. We're talking 72% there. And then, of course, my little footnote down here about how independents feel about the war in general, going from minus 23 points to minus 40 points. Independents, of course, have been such an important part of the president's decaying political coalition. They were pretty much even in the 2024 election, and they have shifted massively against them, and especially on this war.
That's a pretty esoteric notion, though, congressional approval, because presidents do use military force without congressional approval, whether or not people approve of it. And this has been going on for decades and decades. Another esoteric notion is this idea of a ceasefire between the United States and Iran, right? Because there is shooting going on back and forth. Nevertheless, how do people feel about staying in this condition, this ceasefire?
Whatever exactly this ceasefire is, people want it to continue. Take a look here, and this is the rare trifecta. Continue the Iran ceasefire and the negotiations. Look at this. 77% of all Americans. Then you get the rare trifecta. Democrats, 96%. Independents, 81%. And even a majority of Republicans here, what we're essentially saying is, yes, they do, in fact, want this ceasefire to continue. They like this idea. They do not, in fact, want a re-upstart of, let's say, much more force going on in the Middle East, much more force going on in Iran. They want the current condition to hold, whatever exactly you call it.
It is interesting. The fewer Republicans approve of the status quo than Democrats in this case, when it's a president enforcing the status quo.
The American people have one message for the Bidens. That is, go away. Go away. I mean, just look at this. Look at Biden's net favorable rating. In January of 2025, it was minus 22 points. Has it gone any better? No. Not really. He's still way underwater here at minus 19 points. He's 28 points underwater with independents. Joe Biden ended his term as president, is quite unpopular, and he remains quite unpopular. He is an anchor to the Democratic Party and potentially their fortunes in the 2026 midterm elections.
How does that compare to other former Democratic presidents?
Okay, let's go back through the history books. I went back through the spreadsheets, right? This is essentially what we're looking at. Former Democratic presidents' net favorability at this point post-presidency. The lowest by far is Joe Biden, 19 points underwater. Barack Obama was a rock star, 31 points above water. How about Bill Clinton? Wasn't so popular after office, but even then he was just 3 points underwater, basically breaking even. And then Jimmy Carter was 22 points above water. Joe Biden, the most unpopular former Dem president at this point post-presidency of any Democrat that I could find going through the spreadsheets over the last 50 years.
How's Dr. Jill Biden doing?
Okay, so Joe Biden, obviously not Joe Biden, though they are married. Okay, just look at this. Was she a popular first lady? Dem first ladies' net favorability at the end of their final term, she was just 2 points above water. Obviously not as bad as Joe Biden is, but Michelle Obama was 43 points above water. Hillary Clinton was 13 points above water. Again, you're just looking at this and you're seeing that Joe Biden was historically unpopular for a Democratic first lady compared to the two other Democratic first ladies you see on the screen, which again matches what we see with Joe Biden's unpopularity.
Part of this might just be this recent shift sort of against the idea of establishment. What are we seeing in the prediction markets that might indicate there are some issues there? Yeah,
I mean, I think one of the legacies of Joe Biden and sticking on for as long as he did is distrust of the Democratic establishment. And that is why, just take a look here. Chance that 4+ House Democrats, in fact, lose their primary in 2026. Look at this, 68%. I looked back at every single cycle that I could find that was not a post-census redistricting cycle. And the highest I could find in terms of Democrats losing, get this, was only 3. So this would actually beat it. Democratic angst against the establishment at an all-time high, I think in large part driven by the fact that Joe Biden is so unpopular, and therefore you have just this great distrust of the Dem establishment.